Someone stops you at the coffee shop, lights up when they see you, and remembers the small worry you slipped into a sentence the last time you spoke. They ask how it turned out, and you feel genuinely moved that they remembered something you barely meant to say out loud. You know their voice. You remember that they used to work near a hospital, and you even remember the way they say the word actually. But their name is completely gone. You return the warmth and keep the smile going while a small private wince forms underneath it. Someone remembered you clearly, and for one uncomfortable second, you cannot return the same kind of remembering back. If this happens to you often, you may have spent years telling yourself one simple story: you are bad with names. Maybe you say it out loud as half apology and half warning before anyone has the chance to notice. Over time, you may even wonder whether it means you are scattered, careless with people, or simply worse at social life than everyone else. For some people, however, the explanation is subtler than that. It may have less to do with a defect and more to do with where attention was going when the name was first offered. Not everyone forgets names for the same reason, and sometimes forgetting a name is completely ordinary. But there is one attention pattern worth looking at, because its real cost is not the missing name itself. It is what the missing name can make other people believe about you. Before getting to that pattern, there is something about names themselves that changes how this problem looks. Memory researchers have long described an observation commonly known as the baker-baker paradox. If you meet a stranger and learn that the person is a baker, the word arrives with meaning already attached to it. Bread, flour, ovens, early mornings, and an entire kind of life give your memory several places to hold on. But if you meet the same stranger and learn that the person's surname is Baker, the sound is identical while the memory task is different. Now, Baker is not describing anything about the person. It is simply a label with far fewer hooks. Proper names often work this way because they point to a specific human being without telling you much about that human being. That is one reason names can be surprisingly difficult to retain even when you care about the person who owns them. So this part is not personal, and it is not a moral failure. Almost everyone loses names sometimes because names are unusually easy pieces of information to lose. What differs is what attention does during the small window when a name is introduced. Think about what happens in the moments immediately after someone says their name to you. Some people naturally lock onto the label, repeat it silently, match it to the face, and deliberately store it. That is a real social skill because hearing your own name said back to you is one of the fastest signals that another person has registered you as someone specific. For other people, attention lands somewhere else almost immediately. It moves toward the person's intonation, the pause before an answer, or the expression that appears when a follow-up question becomes personal. It notices whether the person seems relaxed or braced, genuinely warm, or merely performing warm. It may register a small breath, a hand adjustment, an overquick smile, or the instant their eyes change when a certain subject appears. By the time attention returns to the name, the conversation has already moved forward. Neither style of attention is broken, and neither one is inherently better. They are simply two different focal lengths on the same human encounter. One prioritizes the label that makes a person easier to retrieve later, while the other prioritizes context, emotion, and small behavioral details. The trouble is that only one of those focal lengths matches what social life measures immediately. A remembered name leaves a receipt the other person can feel in the moment. The other kind of attention often leaves its evidence later, when you remember something specific that the person did not expect you to keep. You may forget what they were called and still remember what made them laugh. You may lose the surname, but remember the moment their voice softened when they mentioned their father. You were not necessarily listening more deeply than everyone else. You may simply have been listening through a different channel. Because that kind of listening does not always come with an obvious receipt, it can go uncredited. Then small consequences begin to accumulate. You stop using people's names in groups unless you are completely sure. You reintroduce yourself first and quietly hope the other person will answer with their own name. Your messages begin with "hey" instead of a name, and your greetings become warm but strategically vague. Eventually, you can feel half a step behind in a social choreography that other people seem to perform without thinking. Then comes the specific ache that makes the pattern matter. Someone remembers a small thing you said, a difficult week you mentioned, or a worry you assumed had disappeared when the conversation ended. They light up when they see you, and you feel how good it is to be remembered that way. Then you realize you cannot say their name back. The other person may walk away perfectly happy and may not even notice what happened. But you notice, and the private mismatch can stay with you much longer than the interaction itself. Over time, the real burden becomes a suspicion that people are quietly filing you into a category that does not fit. Distracted, cold, bad with faces, self-absorbed, or simply someone who does not care enough to remember. The hardest part of the pattern is not the forgetting itself. It is the way the forgetting gets read. Someone may assume that you do not remember them while you are remembering the exact moment their voice softened the last time you spoke. Another person may give you a cooler greeting because they think you forgot them, even though you still remember what they were nervous about the day you met. Explaining that can sound like an excuse, so most of the time you do not explain it. You take the small misread, carry it quietly, and move on. After enough years, those moments can create a strange suspicion that perhaps you really are as absent as other people sometimes assume. Yet part of you knows that you were present enough to remember things that never fit neatly on a name tag. That is the real cost, being read as absent by people you were actually present with. Something changes when you stop trying to fix only the wrong layer of the problem. The instinct is usually to attack the memory by repeating names, inventing mnemonics, or drilling yourself after introductions. Those methods can help, but they do not address the entire social pain. The other change happens at the layer of legibility, by making the attention you actually gave visible to the person who received it. In practice, that can come down to 3 ordinary moves. If you remember the name, use it and attach it to something specific you remember about the person. Instead of only saying, "Hey, Sarah," say, "Hey, Sarah, last time you told me your daughter had an interview, so how did it go?" A name plus a remembered detail is one of the clearest signals that you actually saw someone. If the name has evaporated but the person has not, lead with the specificity you still have. You can simply say, "Last time you told me about the interview, so how did it go?" That detail can communicate recognition even without the missing label, because it proves that the conversation stayed with. And if you know the person but the name and details are both blank, be honest without turning the moment into a confession. You can say, "I remember talking with you, but your name has completely gone on me, so tell me again." Most people will take that more easily than your nervous system expects, because honest recovery is usually less awkward than prolonged pretending. The goal is not to prove that forgetting names is secretly a superior way of caring about people. The goal is to stop using one missing piece of information as evidence that all the attention you gave was meaningless. Now go back to the coffee shop. Someone has just remembered you clearly, and you are standing there warm, grateful, and slightly frozen while their name refuses to appear. Instead of pretending, you return the smile, take one small breath, and reach for the part of them you actually did remember. You say, "I remember you told me your mother was waiting on those test results. So how did they come back?" Their face changes because you have shown them that the conversation they thought mattered only to them also stayed somewhere inside you. They may not even notice that you never said their name. What they notice is that you remembered the thing they were carrying. And that is very close to the deepest thing a remembered name is supposed to signal in the first place. Both count as showing up, even if one of them gets more credit than it deserves.